what I find funny is he wakes her up and says, "Okay, here's the deal. You need to take these two vials, go find Gordon, and go mass produce this," and then puts her under again.
Yeah, and then when she wakes up, it's like
It's like there, and she's like,
as sudden as
"Sweet,
possible. Boom,
sweet,
I'm
I know
gone.
what to do."
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't
It's
know what
such
to
like a
do.
quick shot of her just waking up suddenly, grabbing the vials and leaving.
Yeah, I wouldn't
I would
believe
be
that for
so
a second.
disoriented. Oh, I was drugged and then given an antidote? That's gotta mess up your
Yeah,
system.
no one wakes up after they're drugged and immediately goes, "Ah, I have stuff to do."
Welcome to the Great American Movie Review, where we review great American movies. This is a new show where we pick a movie every week and we talk about it. With Oppenheimer coming out in theaters soon, we decided to look back at the movie that put director Christopher Nolan on the map, Batman Begins.
Yeah, so Batman Begins, of course, came out in 2005. This is a bit of an old review, you could say. Came out 18 years ago. Um,
18 years ago. Really.
yeah, that is a long time ago. Either
Felt
way,
like that 2005 was 18 years ago.
yeah, Christopher Nolan's third movie. Of course, he did Insomnia before this, and then Memento is his first one.
This is
He was a
actually his fourth movie because he did Following
That's
first.
that's true, but his first two hits, Memento and Insomnia,
Right,
uh,
right.
much bigger movies. But he was still known as an indie guy at the time. This was actually supposed to be Darren Aronofsky directing this, and that's what got
Right.
Christian Bale interested into it. But it's actually interesting to see a guy go from indie movies or relatively small budget movies to, and this was still a small budget movie for a comic book movie, but a much bigger
Kind of.
scale. It's all relative.
Right.
It's a bigger budget
$150
for him.
million budget is
Yeah, no big
certainly
deal.
a much bigger budget for
It's a
him.
much bigger budget for him. Probably around par for the other movies at the time, Spider-Man 2, or I mean, year after was Superman Returns.
You know what
Uh,
this movie really highlights to me is that the superhero, like the Flash costing $300 million and Indiana Jones costing $300 million. I'm like, those movies did not need to cost $300 million
yeah,
if this looks as good as it does for 150 18 years ago.
and it also made, I think it was shy of worldwide box office. I think it was like 400 million. So it definitely gave them some returns, even though
Right. I mean,
it,
coming off Batman and Robin, though, being a $125 million
right.
movie, so similarly budgeted, that only made like 280 something, like that's definitely a win.
Apparently $25 million, the difference between this movie and Joel Schumacher.
Right.
Um, all right, let's go straight into it. The movie starts as most Batman movies are wont to do. It starts with the witnessing his parents' death, but we actually get started with young Katie Holmes, or young Rachel, and young Bruce chasing around, trying each of them to keep this arrowhead. It's like a weird game of keep away with a spear tip. Very strange. But eventually, Bruce gets it and then falls through a well and falls to the ground. Eventually, his dad comes to pick him up and he says, "Bruce, why do we fall? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up."
Which is obviously like the main motif of this movie in particular, which I think is I've always loved that. Just like I think that what strikes me about the beginning of this movie is something that Christopher Nolan isn't always as well known for, but like it is a very emotional just foot forward with the character of Bruce and just kind of giving you a connection to him, which I don't think any other Batman movie has really done to the same extent that this does. Um,
Absolutely not, and probably not since, if you don't count BVS's Martha over and over again.
oh,
Martha, Martha. No,
yeah.
but that theme is a good one because it follows him throughout. Obviously, he keeps falling and falling and falling, and he has to learn from his failures, eventually find success. And honestly, it's a little bit like a comic book. So it's how you start with the theme and then it just follows throughout. It's what comic books do. It's what most movies do. So it's nice to see it.
Just storytelling as a whole.
Storytelling. Yep.
Uh,
Storytelling. Yeah. There
like
you
yeah,
go.
just from even okay. First of all, I want to mention that the logos are in black and white, which is obviously Nolan likes to sneak into all of his movies as some sort of black and white, and if it's nowhere else, it's in the logos in this movie still. But then I also just love that the score, like Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard's score for this series is just so good, just from right at the beginning, and it just kind of starts to layer in the themes. It doesn't just like blast you with it right away. And it's not until like an hour into the movie where he's finally Batman for the first time that we actually get like the actual swelling theme of the movie, but you get these little like tastes of it early on. It's just always propelling it so well.
And then it cuts to he finds the Batcave per se. Well, really just bats fly out at him, and that's super scary.
Right.
Ooh, but they go to the opera, and there are bat symbolism and figures. So Bruce gets scared. He asks to leave, and
Yeah.
Thomas and Martha and Bruce all leave and are in an alleyway, which just immediately, I guess they went out the side door. Very
Yeah.
interesting maneuver. I would have gone out, I don't know, the front. Unless that was the front, in which case I've got some questions about the setting of this opera here.
It was clearly sneaking out the back
It
for
was
sure.
clearly sneaking out the back, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then they meet Chill, Joe Chill, who wants their money.
Yeah. What I really love about how Christopher Nolan approaches his storytelling, which is common, it's in all of his films to some extent. A lot of times what his films are about, but there's always this kind of the editing and the perception of time and just kind of how that plays into the actual storytelling of it. Because while it chronologically that theater scene would be next, there is a lot in between because after he falls in the well and the bats, and then it cuts forward in time and back in time. And for the first hour of this movie, it's really just kind of going back and forth and really just kind of laying out Bruce Wayne as a character, his story, his time in, the mountains, becoming a ninja, and all of that stuff is all just kind of interwoven with the stuff that everybody knows. Even in 2005, everybody knew the whole his parents in the alley getting shot and the pearls falling.
Right.
And so I love that this really takes its time, and I love the way that the Nolan's approach to the telling of the story kind of gives it this kind of breadth and life and allows it to really breathe in that, because that's just not something that other Batman movies have ever given us with the character.
Right. So after the mugging scene, after Thomas and Martha are killed, we go. It's a quick scene, reverse shot with young Bruce being comforted by who else but Jim Gordon. Then we are transported forward in time all the way to Bhutan, where he is rummaging around in the streets. So he goes to prison eventually after stealing his own stuff from Wayne Enterprises, and there he what I like how they show is he is not only capable of fighting, but he's capable of living in that kind of environment, which absolutely makes sense if he is a billionaire and also was orphaned young from street crime. Of course, he would not only be trained in martial arts and self-defense, but he would know his way around.
Yeah, and most things were just told what Batman is and
Hmm.
who Bruce Wayne is and what he's done and capable of. But in
Hmm.
this one, it really goes to show us like what he went through to get to where he is.
Yep. So eventually, they bring him to a cell where he meets the card. Something that I noticed was it should have been strange to Bruce. This isn't really a critique; it's more of just a thought. Um, it should have been immediately noticeable to Bruce that Liam Neeson or Ducard knew exactly who he was and like all about him, which is weird because if he's running away from home, why would this random person who he's never met or doesn't know anything about, why would he know who he is? It's just a thought to me, something that I thought. But
Right,
yeah,
which I mean, that obviously strikes him as strange, but clearly this guy is like somebody who has his eye out on things and has a lot of access because he's in this prison just freely, and got an arranged meeting with him
yep,
in a prison. So, um,
in a pretty remote prison too. Like
right, right, right. So,
I don't
yeah,
know.
I never questioned it that much, but it is kind of a curious thing,
It
of
is.
course,
It
because
definitely is. But then again, this is a comic book. Things need to move along, so they eventually
well, and
do.
that's yeah, the movie moves along pretty quickly,
Oh, it
I feel.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So eventually, Ducard persuades him that he knows he knows how to train him to fight evil and to use fear as a tactical weapon instead of a weakness. So he eventually goes on top of the mountain, I assume in the Himalayas, where the League of Shadows are to be found. Something that I love was the doors opened automatically in the middle of nowhere in a mountain. Either way, um,
It was ninjas.
yeah, it was. It sure was.
They gotta open the door if you can't see him.
And then it just closes. All I can imagine is just a ninja like facing the back wall. He just like
Yeah.
pushes it closed, and then he's just standing there the rest of the scene. Either way,
For me, there's no reason to think it's anything other than ninjas.
yeah, it's for me. It's always ninjas.
Oh, of course.
It is always ninjas.
You know what? People don't talk about it enough, but you throw
It's
ninjas in a movie, and I'm
it's
kind of there.
it's always ninjas. But I think he starts training with them, and I think that is when it goes back to younger, or I guess like mid-20s, Bruce Wayne, where he's all he can think about is revenge. All he can think about is anger and guilt.
This is where you get the Joe Chill scene too,
Right.
where he's like confronting him at the, um, or he's going to confront him at the trial.
Yep. So he goes to the trial. Joe Chill was like, I wish I could take it back, and he gets full immunity because he's testifying against Carmine Falcone. And judge says, "Is there? I believe there's a member of the Wayne family." Bruce stands up and immediately just goes out, and then he's waiting around the corner. Joe Chill leaves after being released, and then one of Carmine Falcone's assassins comes up and she kills him.
Yep. Blam.
Yep, mere seconds before Bruce can.
Right, and then he's in the car with Rachel, which this is where it highlights to me something that I think that this movie does better than either of its sequels. And that is the actual presentation of Gotham City itself.
Oh, absolutely.
You get like these wide shots, and it looks like this just absolutely sprawling metropolis with buildings fading into the background. Like there's just so much going on, and you get the kind of, it does feel a little Chicago, but not like The Dark Knight, where it literally is like, this is just Chicago, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep.
But then they'll like divert into areas where you really get to see like full blown slums, even like especially in the last half of the movie. And I'm like, okay, this is like really kind of painting this picture of Gotham.
Well, they also made multiple sets, especially for like the Narrows, which were not obviously in the Chicago skyline, or it wasn't.
Right.
It wasn't set in Chicago, but it feels a lot more world building akin to like the Joker.
Yeah. So then after that point, it kind of really just, that's where it starts to move into the actual, like, here's the real plot kind of kicking in
Right.
at that point, because you're introduced to the elements of the Arkham Asylum, the prisoners getting off, Falcone's influence, all of those elements that are kind of driving the plot forward kind of really get introduced here.
Mm-hmm. And so as he's training, he's learning from Ducard not only tactics, not only strength of skill, but he's also kind of endearing on him a level of philosophy. So
Right.
talking to him about his parents' death, the fact that apparently it wasn't Bruce's fault, it was his father's for not acting. Interesting point. I think it was
as a point.
yeah.
Well, I mean, he obviously said that to make him angry in that moment and trigger his emotional response that he's trying to help him conquer. But to some extent, I also do believe that character would believe that there.
I do believe that. I do believe that if told enough times that it wasn't your fault, you were just a child, you were pretty much defenseless. However, it was your father's fault, as the adult of the situation, as the man who can de-escalate. I think that would absolutely have an effect on him.
Yeah, but they always talk about like it's maybe the most famous like parent death scene in just literature of any kind.
Yep.
Even though it's comic books, if you want to call that literature,
especially nowadays. But yeah,
especially nowadays, since we've seen it so many times, like but even so, like it's just, I love that this movie really lets, like, it's the show don't tell, like you really get Bruce's shame, his guilt, his mixed feelings on everything, and his response to it to become this character, to become this kind of legend, is what this whole movie frames Batman like. That's what he's all about,
Right.
and which is much more interesting. As much as I do enjoy the Michael Keaton Batman movies, they are campy and they are kind of goofy and they're fun for what they are. This to me is something that kind of takes the character and really does something with it.
It adds a level of grit that we've never seen, and
Right.
we definitely
It
will
grounds
see
it.
with Zack Snyder and the rest of the Nolan trilogy. But
Oh yeah,
I think it
that's
I think this movie more than the other two, at least more than Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises, I think what this movie does is it keeps a level of camp that you don't expect in a world so gritty as this, especially
I
during action scenes like like we'll get into eventually, but the police chase. There he's not on the streets, he's flying on rooftops, and clear jokes
right.
that are like said for that, and especially most things dealing with the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow can be quite campy at times. Not that it detracts from the movie. Scarecrow is actually
No, no, I
my favorite part of this movie, and he is underused tragically.
yeah,
Uh,
Cillian Murphy is just a forever underrated actor, and I'm
he
glad
is.
that he's getting the spotlight now in Oppenheimer for like the first time since, I don't know, Red Eye. So
Yep, I'd say. Well, if you haven't seen Peaky Blinders, I'd recommend that.
I've not seen Peaky Blinders, and I've
He
also not seen 28 Days Later.
Oh, that's fair. Then both of those movies both of those projects he's very good in. But for
Yeah,
Peaky
but that's
Blinders,
still
he's definitely
20
the high
years
point.
ago.
It
Yeah,
is.
okay.
It is.
I gotta watch
Um,
Peaky Blinders at some
you
point.
do. It's so good. The earlier parts I really wanted to focus on because it's something that's different than the other Nolan movies, and it's also more fleshed out than the other Batman movies. Even typically, the other
I
Batman
even think,
movies will
yeah,
do they'll just do the opening where his parents die, and then it'll immediately go into Bruce Wayne doing stuff.
I would even argue that it's more fleshed out than the second half of this movie, which I do
Yep.
still really like, but I think that first half really kind of sets up something great, and then the movie follows through
Right.
in like it follows through well, but I think that that first half was really what holds everything together in the second half when it does start to get a little goofy.
Uh, they pronounce it Ra's al Ghul. I know it's Ra's al Ghul, and
They do pronunciations in this movie wrong in general. Like
well,
Falcone is also
yeah,
wrong.
yeah, Carmine Falcone.
I think it's Falcone usually, but
Falcone in the movie, but yeah, Falcone.
or I
But
forget which one. I honestly forget which one it is in the movie, and then it's
in the
whatever it is in this movie, it's wrong. I just
yeah,
remember that.
correct. When it comes to the movie, we can go with the movie pronunciations if you want. So it's Falcone, and then it's Ra's al Ghul. So we
Yeah.
can go with that. Something that's right next to where we were talking about. The scene where he must confront his fear and pass the test of how to deal with that fear in the lineup drill where he is being hunted by Liam Neeson. I think that is a phenomenal scene.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
yep,
Honestly, all the stuff in the monastery is just so good,
it's real good.
except for when they're fighting. But
That's true. I was about to get to that. I really wanted to talk about the fear scene. It's good. We can move on. All right. Ken Watanabe wants, or air quotes, Ra's al Ghul wants Bruce Wayne to kill a. I believe he's a local murderer.
yeah, how do you feel about that twist with the Ra's al Ghul?
With the Ra's al Ghul,
Yeah,
I think of it kind of the same way that I think of the Ben Kingsley Iron Man 3, the Mandarin
it is
twist.
very similar. I do
It's
think the
it's
Mandarin,
kind of
yeah,
similar. The Mandarin is a bit on the nose because while fake Ra's al Ghul dies in the beginning, so it's a
right.
much different hit when Liam Neeson comes back, and obviously he's Ra's al Ghul now. With the Mandarin, they kind of played Ben Kingsley off as a comedic role.
Right,
Um,
they definitely played off the Mandarin and yeah, Marvel as a, very comedically, but to the point though of that movie, like an Iron Man 3,
yeah,
which I think is definitely a worse movie than this, but
yeah.
that twist never bothered me in that movie like it bothers some people just because that it feels like
The
it has a purpose.
the
In
twist on
this
its own,
movie,
the twist on its
yeah.
own doesn't bother me. What does bother me is Guy Pearce is not a very compelling Mandarin.
Oh, yeah, no, that's my problem with that movie after that point. Like the
Yep.
twist, like, yeah, Guy Pearce is just not very interesting as a villain after that point.
I think
Um,
that Liam Neeson
in
is
yeah,
a pretty compelling Ra's al Ghul, especially a
Oh, I
grounded
think
one.
so too. I like him as the character. I don't think the twist was all that significant though. Like,
No,
what is the point of like keeping that information back? It wouldn't have changed anything. I don't think if that he was introduced originally as Ra's al Ghul and they just make it a twist and I'm like, that means nothing.
I think they could have gone into more of what actual Ra's al Ghul's character, or at least they could have,
Right.
because they kept him very well hidden. We didn't know any more than what Bruce knows, and that's throughout the entire movie. What they could have
Right.
done was, well, no, I'm not saying what they could have done because it's fine the way it is, but they could have added more to his character by, I don't know, releasing to the audience but not to Bruce that of like he is Ra's al Ghul, either after he saves him, so we keep that on the back of the mind because we don't know anything about their plan. We just know that they want to destroy Gotham,
Right.
and that kind of puts a veil over what the plot actually is going to be because we assume that, oh cool, so the League of Shadows is gone, so they can't
Right.
destroy Gotham. Who's
Right.
what's the actual plot now? It's random people like the Scarecrow is not very well fleshed out. He's what he is in the movie. He's a pawn, but it mostly stays with lower level villains or lower level henchmen and doesn't
Yeah.
really it picks up gradually and then very quickly. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think the
I guess
twist. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess my only real issue with that like twist, it's not like a major issue that I have with the movie. It's more of a nitpick
Not
for
with me
sure.
either.
But it's just kind of like a thing where it's like if you're gonna have a twist about it, like it should have some sort of impact. And I feel like I like Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul as the character at the beginning and at the end. Like it makes sense for his Bruce's journey in the movie to have to take on this figure who kind of took him in. It gives some sort of emotional weight to the conflict between him and who ends up being the primary antagonist. But the actual moment of the twist, it's like, what was the point in that? I don't really think that would have adjusted the momentum or the emotion of anything in that moment.
I think, like I said, it's because we know barely anything about him. So when the
Yeah.
twist comes, it's like, okay, so what now? Because we didn't have much emotional connection to him. Sure, he was kind of a mentor to Bruce, but not really that much of a mentor. He
Right.
uh, he trained him, sure, but he didn't. He wasn't a father figure to him or anything like that.
Yeah.
We had much more of a compelling moment between Alfred and Bruce when they were on the elevator at the end of the movie, for good reason, because Alfred, for all intents and purposes, after
When he
his parents
repeats
were
the
killed,
"Why do we fall?"
yeah, not only that, but for all intents and purposes, after Thomas and Martha Wayne were killed, Alfred is essentially his father for from then on. So it makes so
Right.
much more sense why there would be a compelling moment for them. But throughout the when the twist happens and afterwards, he's very one dimensional. Liam Neeson.
Right.
So
I
it's kind
agree.
of it's
He's more compelling in the first half of the movie when
absolutely
you don't know
because we
that much
don't
about him.
exactly. And once we learn about him, he's just villain
I'm the
guy.
bad guy.
Yeah, he is the
Yeah.
bad guy. Which it doesn't hit as hard back then. It would hit much harder now that there are so many twist villains, as in like more
Right.
like anti-heroes or protagonists that are actually villains. Where I think a villain like that would be kind of a breath of fresh air
Yeah.
nowadays. It
Like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, and I don't really, like I said, I don't really have like him diminishing and becoming flatter on the when he returns in the movie and being less interesting at that point doesn't super bother me because at that point in the movie it switches from a more character focused movie to a more plot focused movie, and that I think is just a byproduct of that.
right, and he's essentially just used as he always is. He's just used as a plot villain for the end of the movie. He doesn't have to be anything more, especially not for what they've set up and what they plan to do with it. I'm perfectly fine with it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yep.
There's just, yeah, I just have a couple nitpicks in there, but no real issues with it.
No, and I agree with all those points. We can jump around to let's jump around to Rachel Dawes and how what she adds to the story. Where, in my opinion, other at least love interests or main female
Yeah.
characters in the previous four movies kind of were lacking, to
I
say the
get,
least.
yeah, as far as Rachel goes, I get Rachel as a character.
Yep.
She feels out of all of the characters in the movie, though, she feels the most I'm here because that's what makes sense, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Like I just kind of am checking a box almost more so than everybody else. And part of that is the character and the way that she's written. As kind of a love interest, childhood friend, it gives Bruce a grounding. I think that's her greatest purpose in the movie. Um, but her Katie Holmes, who I don't think is a bad actress at all, but um in this movie she's like what she's given to work with, and also her performance is a bit flatter, especially compared to everybody else in the movie. So I was less compelled by everything with Rachel in this.
she is less of a character and more of a plot device,
Yeah.
especially closer to the end when she gets poisoned by Scarecrow, which we'll get to. But yeah, earlier on though,
She's somebody to, yeah.
she does
She's
have some good moments when Bruce is at the hotel with the models for some reason. Well, I
yes.
guess he's keeping up appearances as Bruce because they don't want him to know he's Batman. Which fair enough, weird thing to put in the movie, but whatever. I'll let it slide because it's like I said, keeping up appearances.
Yeah, and she
But
gives him the line, it's not
and
who you are or underneath, it's what you
it's what you
do
do
that
that defines
defines
you.
you, which is
Yep,
another little line that
another
gets repeated back later.
themes. Yep. Um, but yeah, she just kind of catches Bruce off guard, and it's like, oh, this isn't the real me, and it gives him a little bit of a wake up call. Something I wanted to note once he comes back to Gotham, actually showing the steps that he took, not just with meeting with Lucius Fox, getting all the equipment, actually going through and testing the equipment, and like a small montage. But something that I really did like was his first evenings as Batman. He's just essentially wearing a ski mask. He's got the very bare bones equipment, and he's basically interrogating Jim Gordon with a stapler as a gun.
Right,
all
right.
all
Like that's
those,
the
yeah,
yeah, before that, when he finds the cave in the South Wing,
right.
and all the bats swimming around him, and that's the first time that we actually get the full like Batman theme swelling, the boom,
Hmm.
boom, boom, with the drums coming in and like all of that. It's so good in that moment. If it's all
and
just
and
elevating.
he's finally figuring out how to use his fear as a weapon, is
Right,
to literally use his fear, is to become the thing he fears most, which is kind of nice. I
right.
like that
Yeah.
symbolism.
Once again, as I keep kind of harping on, but it's something that we just really don't get in other Batman films or just media,
Yep.
outside of the comics. It's just something that they kind of leave by the wayside. And I think that it's really important that this movie kind of gets that part of it right.
So I don't know how much you wanted to talk about and I'm gonna pronounce it like the movie, the Carmine Falcone things. I think it's all very surface level. He's he's essentially just he's just a mobster who is used to be the first big break for Batman. Um,
Right. I think that, I mean, Tom Wilkinson is a great actor,
yep.
and I think
Oh,
that
they
he
they
really
grabbed a
brings it.
ton of actors for
Yeah.
this one.
He's definitely like chewing every scene that he's in, and
Yeah.
it's great. Like honestly, I think he's an undervalued part of this movie because as much as his character is what you said, just like a something to really be the set the stage, be an example for greater threats to come.
Right.
Um,
He's once Bruce gets back to Gotham, he's like the first main antagonist.
Right. And but as such, what I thought about with the movie too, while thinking about this character, I was like, the movie does such a good job. There's Ra's al Ghul, there's Scarecrow, and there's Carmine Falcone. And they're all there, and they're all very present villains in this movie. It's balancing three different villainous
Not
like
only that, but
threats.
some of the dirty cops, and the one that I can think
Right.
of is I'm Flass, the uh, the dirty cop who is Gordon's partner, who
Yeah.
Batman interrogates. So there are a lot of lower level guys, mid level guys like Falcone and Scarecrow, and then you've got Ra's al Ghul as the main antagonist. So
Right.
it does balance most of that very good.
I think
I've
yeah,
got
I think
some
Scarecrow
exceptions.
gets a little bit undercut by just the plotting, him being kind of more of a plot-focused antagonist in
Yeah,
this film kind of does eliminate some of the potential of that character, but I also think that the potential of that character is only really like tantalizing because of
right.
Cillian Murphy's performance, and like, I just wanted to see more of him as that character, and also the fear gas, the way they represent it in this movie is just really cool.
Yeah, when we can jump around to that. The scene where the apartment that Batman breaks into, and the two henchmen and Scarecrow walk into the apartment. They're about to douse it and then burn it. And I assume the teddy bears, which were introduced beforehand, those are the ones containing the fear gas, or a smuggled in version of the nerve or fear gas. But that entire scene was very well done. Something that I like that they do with Batman, especially for the action scenes or right before the action scenes, none of the POV is from him. In fact, we get none of it. No,
Right.
no night vision, no anything like that. We get everything from the henchmen, and I think that
Yeah,
really helps the tone of this movie when it
for
comes to
sure.
those scenes. I love
I've
those
heard some
scenes.
people based on that, like those scenes, those early scenes of Batman in this movie, talk about how they want like a horror Batman movie from the perspective, like where Batman's kind of the antagonist of the film because it's from the thug's perspective. And as much as like,
Yeah, we kind of
good
got
luck,
it with this one.
yeah, good luck getting it greenlit, like an actual full feature of that. But um,
You could do it with Joker too. It'd be through the entire through the entire scope of the Joker, Joaquin
yeah,
Phoenix's Joker, except you have the Batman be the main villain as just the monster basically beating up everybody that the Joker stands around. But I digress. But yeah, that's the second scene that we get with the fear gas. With the first one, it's more of just like a distortion of the vision. When he opens the chest, yes, there are bats flying out, but you don't really see the bats and everything like you do with the Scarecrow's fear gas, where your fear is essentially everywhere. It's on people's faces, it's all around you.
hmm,
So getting to see that as well, it's very cool. And obviously they do say it, but the Scarecrow's is a much more potent or a much
yeah.
more concentrated dose.
They also give Scarecrow just as a character some of the most just fun lines
They
and just
do.
kind of Murphy's delivery. Like I
Yep.
love the line, "You look like a man who takes himself too seriously. Do you want my opinion? You need to lighten up." And then
Lighten
he
up.
just
That's a good one.
catches him on fire.
Yep. Yep. That's good.
It's so good.
Then he gets saved by Alfred. Him and Lucius Fox save him by synthesizing a kind of vaccine against it. What stood out to me a little bit, and it feels like something that Lucius Fox, being as smart as he is, he probably should have seen. That scene where he describes the fact of it's a much more concentrated dose. It's inhaled by the lungs and can be very, 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 very terrible to breathe in. And then, like, one of the few next scenes is, I think it's Earl, the CEO of Wayne Enterprises, going down and talking to Lucius Fox about the microwave emitter that they lost one, and he wants
Oh
everything on
yeah.
it. And obviously, if Lucius Fox had done what he was told and actually looked at everything, he would have realized, wait a second, this
Like give
is
Lucius I understand why they didn't, but they definitely could have because that
they
I see what you're
definitely could
saying.
have, because why would you? It had already been introduced that there was something there, or
Right.
when the other assistant DA gets shot
I
and
do
killed,
think, yeah, I do think
it
it
was definitely
wants
introduced.
the movie is definitely not doing that to prioritize like the agency of Bruce Wayne and his own figuring out abilities.
It's
I
also
think this,
it's also
yeah,
building up the end joke of "Didn't you get the memo?" when
yes,
Lucius Fox says that. So I get that.
yeah,
I
like yeah,
just
because I think that Batman movies have never really gotten the detective aspect of Bruce Wayne correct until I think actually
except for, yeah, the Batman. Yes.
The
Yep.
Batman, I think, really did get that aspect of it. This one, I think, is the closest to that because you get to go. He goes to scenes and he's following the crime as it's
Right.
going and kind of piecing it together. But yeah, there's stuff like that in this movie where it's like somebody else could have also figured this out and helped it along. But because the movie wanted to give him the agency, that stuff is not really
I
considered.
guess just as well, the fact that all of those scenes where he could have been detecting were not from his point of view, except for the going to the apartment one. Since they're not all from his point of view, it's difficult to see him detecting. But
Right.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. What I would have felt would have helped me with that scene, the Earl and Lucius Fox thing. You can keep that scene in, but eventually, I think right before Bruce finds out about the microwave emitter, he could have called him and be like, "This is just like I feared. There's a microwave emitter in the city." Simple as that. Just to show me that Lucius Fox is actually smarter than he seems. It's
Yeah.
just weird to me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
It's a small
I mean,
gripe, I grant.
yeah, it's one of those. This movie has, I think, a lot of nitpicks in it. I
True,
think that
true.
um I think that all Christopher Nolan movies to some extent do, but he does so well with like the grandness of his presentation
Yeah,
that
he looks at the big picture. Yeah,
right. I think that he nails big picture as well as anybody ever has from that kind of directing position in film, you know. But some of the minutiae, some of the details are not there, and whether or not that bothers you, I think is just up to taste.
well, it's those small things are just kind of in the back of my mind when I'm watching it.
Oh
That's the
yeah.
only thing. That's how I've grown, is just watching movies that way. I think it helps because it whenever I find a movie where I don't find any of those flaws, it makes it all the better for me.
Yeah, which I'm very much more of like an emotional foot forward in terms
Yep.
of my experience with the film, like how it really hits me. And this movie just kind of comes out with like a good emotional core just right from the beginning, and it just kind of carries that through. So those little details I don't it's not even that I don't think about it in passing, but it is in passing. You know, it is not
Yeah.
something that I hold on to as I'm
Oh,
watching.
it's definitely in passing. I just wanted to bring it up because these are just things that I observe.
Right, right. Just little, yeah,
I
observation.
still love this movie.
Oh, it's so good. Even
So
with its terrible, terrible, terrible action.
that's true. We
Which I think that okay, I think that Nolan, once again going back to the grand scale thing,
yep.
I think that the set pieces are great to the
It's all very
actual like
cinematic.
there's the cinematic nature of this like the action scenes themselves are really good. Like there is a flow and emotion to it that works despite the fact that it is really terrible close up. I've definitely seen worse. It's not that shaky cam nonsense that was especially popular post-born
And
around this time period.
yeah,
But
definitely
it
in the
is not
mid 2010s. Yeah.
yeah, but it is not up to snuff. It is not good. It's still like
When
every time it cuts into them
oh
punching
man,
each other, it is just cut, 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 cut,
when you have like
and like
five
a
cuts in the
blur.
span of 3 seconds, it's difficult to see what's going on, and
Yeah.
especially when it's all very dark.
Yeah, it's just it's a lot. And fortunately, there's not honestly a lot of hand-to-hand like sequences in that way that builds up a lot more in the suspense. And
Right.
then there is one the Tumblr car chase is definitely the peak action scene sequence just because there's good stakes with Rachel being in the car and being transported to be saved, and it just is the most clearly shot action sequence, and you get all of like these dynamic things with like the police chasing him and all these different places and jumping across rooftops. It's all very memorable, but I can't say the same thing for any other like actual action sequence in this movie,
Right.
unfortunately.
I would say as well, jumping ahead, I do want to talk about the when Falcone is brought to Arkham Asylum and is eventually
Mm,
corrupted in prison by Crane, and then eventually brought to Arkham Asylum. Rachel goes to Arkham Asylum and then is shown what they were doing, pouring all the chemicals into the water supply, and then eventually drugged by a quote concentrated dose that is eventually lethal. That entire sequence of events is much better. That action scene is a lot better than the other ones, I will say.
right. Yes, I agree.
But I will say, I don't think I wrote it down, but the okay, here we go. Here's the quote. It's as soon as the lights are shut off, he says he's here. Arkham Thug says who? He says the Batman. He says what do we do? What anyone does when a prowler comes around. Call the police. He says, you want cops here? He says, at this point, they can't stop us. But the Batman has a talent for disruption. Force him outside, the police will take him down. I just love not only the delivery, but that is so on par with like what I think Killian Murphy's version of Scarecrow
Right.
would do. He's very
And then
pragmatic when it comes to
right.
what we've done. It's complete. It's not up to us anymore. They can find this out. It won't stop us, but we want to take
Yeah.
out the Batman, and the Batman probably, and he doesn't know what the Batman has. The Batman could, because he survived Crane's fear gas attempt before, so he doesn't know if he has an antidote strong enough to put into the water supply to neutralize the agent. He doesn't know
Right.
that. He just wants to get rid of the Batman. these little nuggets of joy I get from Cillian Murphy's character
Oh
is so
yeah,
good.
he's just so good. He just like steals all the little moments that he has. He
He
doesn't
does.
unfortunately have a lot to steal, but when he's there, he's stealing it. So.
Yep,
Yeah, and that whole sequence is great
it
because
is.
it leads into as much as like the bat sonar thing where he calls in all the bats. Like I'm like, this is the silliest gadget in this whole thing. It's a silly little device to
It
get
is.
to a really cool looking moment where he's like
And yeah,
ziplining up the stair shaft, the
yep,
stairwell.
and it definitely is.
Um, and then that leads into because like there's like Gordon and all the cops are standing outside, and it's like, what are we waiting for? It's like back up, back up. And then he's like, yeah, we're like, they got SWAT coming in or something. And then Gordon just goes in, and then he meets up with Batman, and that's when Batman gives him the antidote and everything, and then it starts that really great car chase.
Another weird thing to me, I don't remember a scene where Gordon and Batman were talking that long about like what the plan was for this, because when Gordon just the way it's edited, I don't know if this has to do with writing or the way that it's edited, but it immediately goes from Gordon is at the stairwell. Gordon is brought up by Batman up the stairwell. He is dropped off, and immediately he goes like, "What's wrong with her?"
Right.
Or like, how badly is she injured? I don't know if Batman had talked to Jim Gordon like, I have a person here who is in need of help, and that's why he went in. But I don't know.
Batman's
It
not
was
much of a
weird to me.
conversationalist.
No, that's true, but I think there might have been a cut that they or yeah,
I
a
wouldn't
cut that
doubt
they
it,
edited
but
out that was like she's injured or something like
if
that.
there
She
if
needs
there
help.
was, I didn't think about it, but
Again,
um,
just something I observed, something
right,
small.
right, right.
Then eventually we get to the car chase scene, Batman and Rachel
Yep.
against the cops.
Which some cops they died in that.
I was about to say the very first car that he runs over.
He crushes the front of it.
You can clearly see the windshield is caved in from the tire. Yeah, no,
Right.
those guys are dead.
And then there's a couple other cars that like fully flip, and I'm like, if they
Fully
didn't die,
flip.
there was a high chance that they died,
Yeah,
which
yeah. They very clearly died because if sure it flipped and it was probably very slow for the practical effects, but in a real chase, if you flip at that speed, that's pretty rough. You are very
yeah.
seriously injured.
I'm more than
Um,
happy to see a cool car crash done like with practical effects
of
on the big
course. Yep.
screen. Absolutely.
Yep.
However,
No,
I do
knowing what we
question
know,
it. I
yeah,
do question it when the person's supposed to not be dead and we're supposed to like understand that that person's still alive.
yeah, yeah.
So,
That's a little weird. Other than that, and I didn't know this until researching it. They used miniatures for a great deal of that chase, like the whole
oh
flying
yeah.
on rooftop thing. The
Yeah, I
entire
believe
building
that
was
for sure.
miniature, and the entire car was miniature, and all the effects like that were miniature, which
I love
so cool.
movies.
Yep, so good.
That's the
Um,
stuff I hear where I'm like, yeah,
So
it's the best stuff.
eventually they get back to Wayne Manor. He saves her in like record time. Wow, she probably did not have a lot of time to live. What I find funny is he wakes her up and says, "Okay, here's the deal. You need to take these two vials, go find Gordon, and go mass produce this," and then puts her under again.
Yeah, and then when she wakes up, it's like
It's like there, and she's like,
as sudden as
"Sweet,
possible. Boom,
sweet.
I'm
I know
gone.
what to do."
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't
It's
know what
such
to
like a
do.
quick shot of her just waking up suddenly, grabbing the vials and leaving.
Yeah, I wouldn't
I would
believe
be
that for
so
a second.
disoriented. Oh, I was drugged and then given an antidote. That's gonna mess up your
Yeah,
system.
no one wakes up after they're drugged and immediately goes, "Ah, I have stuff to do."
Yeah,
No,
no.
no, they're like, I'll just hit the snooze button. Gotham can save itself later. Oh man,
Yeah, like maybe if she was like stumbling around and still seemed like kind of out of it, but no,
yeah,
she's like fully alert.
yep. Or if she had a different background, she's an assistant district attorney. I don't believe for a fact for a moment that she's trained how to deal with being drugged and immediately going
Yeah,
back to
maybe there
work.
was like some delayed release adrenaline or something in there.
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
All right,
but
and then we go to the birthday celebration, and that's when we get to discover actual Ra's al Ghul. Oh, but before this, Bruce sends Lucius Fox back to Wayne Enterprises to synthesize more of the vaccine, which I do like because it ends in the quote, I didn't think you really needed a card to get in. He said, I don't.
Or yeah, he's like a man of your something. Yeah, I forget
A man of your
exactly the
intellect
line.
or something like that.
Yeah.
It's really good. And then we get
I
introduced
didn't think
back
that
to
would be a
Ra's al
problem
Ghul.
for a man like you or a
Yep,
man of you. Yeah, whatever he
exactly.
says. Yeah.
But
Then he
and
like drunkenly. Oh, this movie, I will also say, better
mhm,
than I think any other Batman movie, kind of gets the Bruce Wayne as a playboy kind of
absolutely
thing. Like it actually does it. Every other one you just get to see him like moping around a lot, but this one you see him put on the mask of the playboy and go out to the hotel earlier in the movie and like swim in the bath with the two girls and buy it. Well, of course, after encouragement from Alfred to do something reckless on purpose to kind
right.
of protect his image because it's a weird coincidence that you come back in town and are off-putting and broody and then you don't and then you're also there's also a new vigilante around.
That's a good point because when he's and this is purely out of this is him wanting to get the people to safety. What he does is like tells them off in a very
Right.
playboy style. Which the fact that no one looks at him and goes like, "Bruce, this isn't like you." That's how we know that pretty normal behavior for him.
Right. Or even if it wasn't, even if it's not them recognizing that it's normal behavior, it is also pointing out maybe some truth to it and that nobody really
Hmm.
does know him there, you know?
That's true. Yeah,
So
because
nobody's
he's
going
been
to call
gone
him
for
out
so
on
long.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I always did love the way he managed to evacuate those people, playing into that persona
Yep.
to kind of do it.
It's good.
I will say, I like the way it's presented. One thing, a little nitpick that does bother me is the way that Rachel just says it at the end, where she's like, this isn't your mask. This
Yeah.
is your mask." I was like, "That's okay. I got it throughout the movie. You're a little on the nose."
A little bit too much. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah, eventually we get to, or after he clears the room, we get to the big reveal that Ra's al Ghul has been behind everything. Everything. Even implying he was behind Thomas Wayne's and Martha Wayne's murder,
yeah.
which I, I
It
don't
gets a
believe for a
little
second,
it
but
gets a little conspiracy theory-ish,
a
You
little
just
bit.
it's at a point in the movie where you can just kind of roll your eyes and move on. So,
Very true.
yeah.
He is so one
Um,
dimensional. Something I did write down. It's very particularly worded, and I wrote down this. He says, when regards to the League of Shadows, we've been doing this for a long time. Every time a civilization reaches the pinnacle of decadence, we return to restore the balance. And he claims to have done that with the Fire of London. I assume the 1666 Fire of London, boarding rats onto trading ships for the Black Death, and then the sack of Rome. My perspective on that is we assume that Ra's al Ghul is a child of history if he's going to make that claim.
yeah.
Um, None of those things led to any amount of good. All those things led to well, a great deal of death and despair for every person in it for
Yeah, it's that
centuries.
yeah, and that's that same thing. That whole thing that he's saying is very conspiracy theory-esque, and I
Yeah,
just kind of roll my eyes and move on whenever he's talking about that. I'm like, whatever, it's fine. Sure.
that's true.
I just say sure and go on, go over it.
The reason I bring it up is because surely Bruce would have countered with none of those things led to any good. This won't either. You think that just because people are suffering, therefore you have to start over and that'll lead to less people suffering. No, it'll lead to more people suffering. If you want to take out corruption, take out corruptions. Don't take out innocent people. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
That's all he had to say to me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get that Ra's al Ghul is one dimensional and he's that character that believes that this is the right thing to do. If whether or not he knows that this is gonna be nothing but bad to the people, but that's all I can think of.
Yeah.
Why would you think that? And why would Bruce just be like, all right, sure, you just want to destroy the world?
It's stuff like this that to me makes the second half of the movie not quite as strong as the first half,
I
even though I
agree.
do think it's all good,
It's all
But
good.
it's
It's
all
all
good.
good.
It just but the first half really kind of is the meat of it. The second half is the fireworks.
Hmm.
So,
And it also has to remain a comic book esque movie where uh,
yeah.
the
Despite
plot and the
everything you
dialogue
can't
trudges along. You can't
yeah.
think about it too much, even though that's all I can do.
Yeah, with a character like Batman, as much as you try to ground it in
And
some
this is
sort
the
of
most grounded it's
reality.
ever been, or
Right.
ever will be, probably.
I agree. I agree. Because even the Batman, I think, really leans into its comic book nature, which I think really works for that movie. Um, but it still goes for a grounded approach, but a different way. This
It,
one
it
goes
goes for
for
a
more
grounded
like
approach,
our
but
world.
even the chase scene with Penguin, different movie, the Batman now. The chase scene with the Penguin and Batman, that's much less of a realistic chase scene than even this
Right. The
movie.
one in
He's
here.
flying on rooftops,
Right.
to me.
No, I agree. There's a heightened reality
Hmm.
with like a grimy like real world quality to it in the Batman, whereas this just feels like it's really trying to be something that could exist in our world.
Something that could easily, and that's shown by everything that Lucius Fox puts forth to him, aside from the sonar thing that calls in the bats. That's a bit weird,
Yeah.
but the Batmobile, literally something that could be used by the military.
Right.
His all his gadgets could be used by the military. His suit, bulletproof, yes, penetration resistant from the taser that Rachel shoots him with. That, yes, but everything has that level of realism that where you could believe a multi-billionaire would absolutely be able to afford any and all of this.
Yeah, and talking about Lucius while we're at it,
Mm-hmm.
Morgan Freeman, once again, perfect, just like casting kind of moment here.
Man, he just plays
Um,
Morgan Freeman. It's just Morgan Freeman is
he
perfect for
does,
every
but he's
character.
so good, still like he's played so many great characters in his career, but I don't think it's that hard to argue that within people of, our generation around our age, that when we think of Morgan Freeman, one of the first, if not the first character we think of is this version of Lucius Fox.
Right.
That's definitely true for me.
Yep.
Just because
Uh,
it is just another, it's just, yeah, once again, just the movie's casting across the board for the most part. The one,
even to
yeah.
me, when while I grew up with it, this version of Jim Gordon, even in my
Yes,
opinion, Gary Oldman is like the quintessential Jim Gordon.
I agree
Um,
completely. Which Gary Oldman just has that quality where you can just, like, this is what I thought Gary Oldman was like in movies.
right.
And then I watched a bunch more movies and
Yeah.
was like, I was woefully wrong about that. He is very all over the place, of course,
Yeah.
but because he's so good in this and kind of chameleon like that, this more everyman style character, he
Well,
just
he's
plays
that.
off so well.
Yep, he's that innocent and heroic, innocent
Right.
while being heroic cop who's the only non-dirty cop in the city. That's
Yeah.
that's that's who he is, and he plays it brilliantly. Where were we? Oh yeah. So Rachel wakes up. She is doing her thing. Bruce is just now recovering from the fire. So he's in the elevator with Alfred. We've covered this. It's a great moment between he and Alfred. Then we haven't really talked about it, but Arkham Asylum, they allow everyone to escape, including Scarecrow, and that's where we stand now. And Ra's al Ghul has the microwave emitter in the Narrows. They are preparing to raise the bridges and leave everyone on the island. Rachel somehow gets onto the island, and gives Gordon both of the vials, which I thought was weird. Why would so Batman gave her both vials so that one of them could be mass produced, one of them could be used to give to Jim Gordon. But the second vial was never heard from again. Like he inoculated himself when the microwave emitter was turned on, but the second vial just absolutely disappeared. I
Yeah, I'm
guess.
not gonna lie. In that moment, I got a knock on my door from a guy who was coming to fix our Wi-Fi, which is always in and out. So since I was streaming the movie, I had to pause it. I actually have the 4Ks coming in today for the trilogy, but I did not have those yet, so I had to stop the movie and wait for a little bit right at that moment. So then when I resumed it, I was a little fuzzy on like the actual right what you're talking about now.
Gotcha. So yeah, what I'm talking about is Rachel gets back onto the island and gives Jim Gordon both vials, and he does nothing with the second vial. When the microwave emitter is turned on, he inoculates himself, and the second vial is just never heard from again.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
it was kind of a thing where Batman was like, okay, we need to mass produce this one, give this one to Jim Gordon. And then she takes both vials. We even clearly see them being taken. She gives him both vials, but he stays on the island. So what is he going to do with a second vial?
No
Um,
comment.
yeah, it's just
I I have nothing.
Whether it's
I
continuity or
don't know.
whether it was just they forgot about it, either way,
Yeah, if they
um,
addressed it, I didn't see it.
they definitely did not. I'm just gonna leave it there. Um, so we get to various shenanigans happen when the microwave emitter is turned on. Flass,
Which I love the whole scarecrow on the horse and then the fire breath and everything
I love
freaking people
that.
out.
The fact that
And
she.
even more, sorry,
Go
even
ahead.
more, I love just when Batman's gliding over and Batman's just trying to get it from point A to point B. He's just going across. But you see from underneath everybody looking up at him and he's got
His
the
mouth and
scary
eyes are on
face.
fire. Yeah,
Yeah, he's got the scary face
that
and
one's
they're all
good.
freaking out.
The thing I don't like about Scarecrow is this great villain and smart dude is brought to his knees by a taser.
Oh yeah. He's just like going crazy and then gets tased and then that's it. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, it's kind of the end of a character who was kind of
Yeah.
underused for the whole movie.
Well, it's interesting too, because I think that as much as he is underutilized in this movie, he is utilized in the whole trilogy, which I
Mostly as a
appreciate.
cameo though.
Right, but even so, I'm glad that there is this through line of his character being present in each film, which isn't true for any other like side character
But
like that,
but
you
to
know?
me it's like a slap in the face. It's like, remember this guy? We're just gonna have him be foiled again. It's like,
Yeah, no, I
no.
wish I almost wish there
No.
was a little bit more of a feature on him, you
Ugh.
know? But it makes more sense still
It's actually probably
thematically.
my only
Yeah.
big gripe with the Dark Knight is we're introduced immediately to Scarecrow and then immediately he's foiled like 2 minutes
Oh
later.
yeah.
Uh, Either way, so yep, Flass has been dealt with. He overreacts to seeing just two random dudes about to shoot him. Gary Oldman knocks him out. Very good. Handcuffs him to a pipe. That kind of seems like his death. Like, why would you handcuff your partner to a pipe with no weapon in an area where everyone's going crazy and eating each other? But whatever. So Flass is presumed dead. Either way.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually, Bruce gets to Jim Gordon via the, or briefs Jim Gordon. He eventually needs to get to the tram system. He's going to, or Ra's al Ghul is going to take the tram, all the way to Wayne Enterprises, where the entire central lining of all the waterworks is. Um, my question to that would be, how would he know that? How does he know that he's going to the main water line?
Right.
He was never told that, whatever. Unless it could have been Lucius Fox telling him. Like I said before, he could have called him on the phone and just been like, it's as I feared. There's a microwave emitter missing. What you told me needs to be aerosolized, or however they say it in the movie. The waterworks is underneath Wayne Enterprises. If they and the microwave emitter only has this much of a range, so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all very plot heavy. It's all like we're gonna describe to you what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're good. Here's the problem, solve it. You know, and then yeah, it's all. That's kind of what the last little bit of the movie is. But once again, I'm invested in everything well enough that like I don't really care at that point. But it is. I do appreciate though, like the above ground railroads do kind of provide like an extra added character element to the city itself.
Yep.
And the progression of it from when you see it early on in the film, when they're going to the opera and it's all clean, to then every other time you see it in the movie and it's all full of graffiti and stuff. But there's something elegant about it still because of the way it's raised up and the look of it. As this weird kind of contrast that I really appreciate in the movie.
Yep. I
And
agree.
then, yeah, and then I do like it at the end, that being kind of the final set piece too.
Yeah, it's the climax set piece, which was also a miniature. That and
Mm,
the entire thing of that, even when it crashes. So he briefs Gordon. Gordon is to drive the tumbler all the way over to Wayne Enterprises and then shoot down the connecting rail lines for the train. And then action set piece, which is its usual choreographed nonsense of cuts in between the
right.
action that don't make a lot of sense between Bruce and or Batman and four League of Shadows assassins. And then eventually he gets to the train, fights Ra's al Ghul, eventually stabs one of his batarangs, I think, or whether it's one of Ra's al Ghul's knives into the train controls so that it can't stop. And he says, "How are you going to stop the train? Who says anything about stopping it?" And then that's when the the train system goes, the train derails. But beforehand, he says, "I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you either." And
Yeah. Does
uh,
that
I,
count
I'll
as killing?
I'll talk about that because I have an entire point on the no gun and
Okay.
no killing rule. We can do
Yeah.
that during the characters thing. Um, but that is the end of the action for all intents and purposes. I don't know if you want to talk about the resolution. The resolution's a little bit like it's a pretty formulaic resolution.
Gonna build this house back brick by brick,
Yeah,
just the way
exactly,
it was. Just
exactly.
the way it was.
Yeah,
Thought we could use some more foundational or whatever in the
around the
south
southeast
wing.
wing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
No.
and then yeah, resolution with
Kiss
Yep,
Rachel,
resolution
hold
with
hands,
Rachel.
walk on the destroyed mansion,
Also,
and
did you notice in the background? It's a very rural background.
oh yes.
There's no sign of Gotham at all. That's the reason. It
Which I
was.
kind of okay, I kind of like when movies do that. Like it's a height that's the kind of heightened reality thing, which is weird in this movie because it doesn't really have a lot of that.
I think it's better than the alternative. The alternative is
Right.
putting in a green screen and showing Gotham in the background.
Right.
I'm okay with keeping it practical and not putting
But
it
I'm
CGI.
also I like it makes me think a little bit of in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. Whenever it would cut, especially in Spider-Man 2 in particular, whenever it would cut to Harry's like penthouse, it was always night and there was always lightning, but no rain.
Right.
And it's just kind of the stylized thing. It's not to that level of heightened, but it is kind of a heightened thing where it is just the fact that the city is so dense and then his mansion exists technically in Gotham, but it's surrounded by grass, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And I do
it's
like that
kind of,
better than
yeah.
say BVS, where apparently Gotham and Metropolis are just across the bay. You could wave to each other. So next we can get to our little point system here.
Yeah, if you want to just kind of break it down quickly like we just did.
Yeah, un momento, por favor. Let's go. All right, so here's how the point system works. As a disclaimer to everyone, this is not how either of us would rank these or rate these movies, either individually or the same. This is just a casual. We've given ourselves between 0 and 2 points amongst a few categories. We will discuss that and then eventually give it a point system. We went 0 to 2, so it can be 0, 1, or 2, leading up to the actual number it can be. The reason we're doing this is because it's not going to reflect badly or the opposite on a movie if we go 20 out of 20 or 0 out of 0, and we just want to keep it casual.
Yep, and we are not fully committed to this system. We're just trying
That's
it out
true.
right
It may
now, and
change.
it may change.
We reserve
Yeah,
the right to do whatever we want and be really haughty and mess up people's experiences. All right, let's do this.
absolutely.
All right, so from 0 to 2, the first category is writing. What do we think of the writing when it comes to Batman Begins?
I'm too. Like for me, I just think there's a lot of great, like very memorable moments and lines. Um, that it can has like it's very simple theming, but it's effective. It's effective, especially since you're having to set up a whole character and a whole world. It just does a really great job at, I think, all of that. So I give writing a 2.
I'd give it a 1. The reason um, is because when it comes to the themes, I agree with everything that you said. It executes on its themes perfectly. It's an origin story. It's trying to be simple with its themes. There are some things that I find a little bit too weird to me, and whether we're considering writing to be certain scenes, certain dialogue, and certain character qualities that are not fleshed out by the end of the movie, I just don't think it does enough to deserve it too. So,
I think yeah, because
do
with I
we?
think that we both have some nitpicks with like some
Mhm.
of the decisions with the writing in the movie in terms of some of the plotting and everything. So I'll tip it to the 1.
Are you sure, or do you want to meet in the middle and we can do a 1.5 system? That way, everything ends in
Let's keep it
1.5. Let's keep it at one or
let's
two.
not get
Okay.
too caught in the minutia of that. I'm willing to give you a 1.
Okay. So 1 for that. The next one is world building. I'll start with this one. I think it's an easy 2. This is the best world building we've seen in Batman, and I think it's the best world building and setting that we will see in the Nolan trilogy.
I agree completely.
Mhm. The next one, and I did kind of go into characters as it pertains to writing, but for characters, I think it can be more fleshed out with actors specifically, or maybe with the way that characters have their arcs. So I think we can have characters as a category as well.
So characters and actors separate.
Characters and actors are separate, in
Okay.
my opinion.
Okay. Well, let's go with it right now for that.
Okay, so characters would be up next. If you want to go
Yeah.
first.
I think this is a movie that's populated with great characters that are filled in well by great actors. I think that there are a few characters that are underutilized or just checking off boxes. Not that every movie doesn't have that, but I think the Rachel character in particular is a little bit one note and flat. And Scarecrow could have been used a little bit more fully, but um, I think that the main cast, like who I would consider, or I mean, I guess Rachel would be part of that, but Batman, Michael Caine, um, and then Lucius Fox and Gordon are all just really great. So I'm kind of in between a one and a two. If you have a thought there,
I agree with everything from that. I will say I think there is more good than bad when it comes to characters in this movie. Like you said,
but is it
Rachel.
great? Two is great. One is
Two
good.
two two
Zero
would
is
be
not
good.
good.
If one is good, then I would probably go with the one because of the fact that I think the fact that Scarecrow is not the main antagonist and Ra's al Ghul is, and because he's so one-dimensional in such a way that it's not very fulfilling to me, his character, I would probably give it a one. I like
Okay.
Ra's al Ghul as a character, but because he's not fleshed out, and has no room in the sequels, given that he dies, uh, I don't think there's any reason for me to give it a two.
All right, I'm with it.
All right, so a one. Next one is directing.
Directing, I'm pretty firm on my opinion that this is a two, just because
So
I
am I.
think Nolan is just one of the best directors that's working right now. And even though the action scenes, specifically the close-up action, is not handled very well, everything else is just done immaculately, and he's so good at just his everything that he does with the
As the director, the buck
just
would
is.
stop there for him for I guess
So,
everything. And the
yep.
the choreography fights and some of the action scenes are a little bit off. Some of the dialogue can be a little bit off, but that's more so with writing. But I think everything with the directing, all the acting, all the motivation for that, all the set pieces, the screenplay had to have been magnificent for this movie because it just seems like it. I think it's an easy two for me as well,
Yep. I agree.
especially considering the fact that this is his first uh, real budget movie. Yes, that's an easy two for me.
Yeah.
The next
All
one is
right.
action.
Action. Yeah, action, I'm gonna have to give a zero. There's one great action sequence with the car, but the actual, if within the context of this being an action movie, it
Right.
does not deliver what you want from an action movie in that kind of capacity. There's great sequences, great sets, but there's the actual action itself is not handled as well as it could have been.
I'm going to agree with that. I probably would have given it a one purely based off of some of the action scenes, some of the early action scenes as well, because I'd consider the action to be the original Fear scene with Liam Neeson and Christian Bale during the League of Shadows, but it immediately is muddled with the destruction of the temple scene, which is a terrible action sequence. It's got some good parts to it, but
Right.
most of it is not good.
All the good parts is not the action itself, though. It's just there's good editing in the actual like getting a feel for the space
Sure.
of the scenes. The sets are great,
It is a
and
suspenseful
like
scene, I guess, not an action scene.
right.
But I
But the
would
actual action within it as an action film, I think that's where it drops the ball.
I would consider most of the car chase scene to be spectacularly done when it comes to action.
Yes,
But
I
but
think
I
the car
do
chase
think
scene is great.
I do think that is an exception. So I'm willing to put a
Yeah.
zero.
Okay.
The next one is acting. I'll start with this. Given the fact that they grabbed the most amount of A-list actors that I could think of for even
Right.
small parts. I'd have to say yes, all of them delivered.
Outside of Rachel, I don't think there's like every performance in the movie is completely dynamic and
Well,
interesting to me.
true, and that was characters. This I would say would be acting. So I
Right, I guess
don't
so
think.
outside of Katie Holmes though, like I think in her performance too, she doesn't like Liam Neeson, we talked about that character is
Mhm,
kind of one note, but he makes it memorable. Tom Wilkinson makes his character very memorable.
that's fair.
Rachel is memorable because she is so prominent in the movie as a
Yeah,
character,
she
but
gets a
I
lot of
don't
screen
think
time.
right, I don't think her performance is great, but outside of her,
Everyone is
I
spectacular.
think that everybody's so good that I'm still willing to give it a 2.
Same. I agree. The next one is visuals.
2. I think Christopher
Yeah,
Nolan has a great eye. Just like those landscape shots early on are so good. Everything looks good in the movie. Um,
it's a
yeah,
2005 movie, and the CGI is still
yeah,
phenomenal.
there's only like one or two shots in the movie where I'm like that CGI is very evident. Like some
Yeah,
of the train sequence, like with like like just in the landscaping of that, but it's like evident in a way that's not bothersome. It's just kind of like, oh hey, I recognize that as a CGI shot, you
and
know?
an example of that would be in Justice League, the opening scene with Batman in a Gotham that is very clearly a green screen Gotham. We don't
Oh
get
yeah,
anything like that. It's mostly just like a matte painting in the background or something like that, which is typical of movies, especially in like early 2000s when CGI wasn't very prominent. I'd say the main detraction would be the bats. Some of the bat sequences can be very jarring
right.
with the
But then
CGI
in,
that
like,
they
once
use.
again, in a 2005 film,
It's
like,
great.
for it to it, like,
It's
only
great.
has, like, 1 or 2 moments where I'm, like, slightly taken out
Yep.
by, like, a special effect.
So the next one is editing. I'm going to have to give this one a one myself. It's
Just because of some of the sequencing and stuff,
very much of the action sequencing, but also some of.
outside of, like yeah, you go.
No, go ahead. 'Cause I'm
Well,
gathering my thoughts.
I was gonna say outside of, like, the specific hand-to-hand combat sequences, which are edited so poorly, um but I think that's just like a mishandling of some of that action and not understanding that. Like up to this point, Nolan had not directed anything that was really heavily action oriented at all. Um,
That's
and
true,
so,
but I'll also harp on back to the some of
cause,
the dialogue was clearly cut in a way that's kind of jarring. I'll point to the Gary Oldman immediately knowing that Rachel's injured and like asking how injured she is, not a split second after being dropped off from being like taken from floor 1 to like floor 10 in a building. That's a little bit weird. But some of the other editing choices, I also think some of the it's not a lot, and there's not really many examples that I can point to, but some of the choices when it comes back to the flashbacks, not earlier on, but later on, when it goes back to the flashbacks, some of those are edited quite weirdly.
I
Like,
mean, overall, I would say this is a very well edited film with like the way it balances different things, especially in the first half with all the different time elements that it's using with its jumping back and forth. However, I will give it to you with this that I'd be willing to go to a 1 because of your feelings on it.
I'm thinking of as well, what would we consider to be twos? We're putting a lot of it, a lot more into this than we probably should. But if we're thinking middle of the pack when it comes, you said it was good. I do think the editing is good. I do think in some parts it's great. I do
Right.
think in some parts it's poor. So I
Yeah,
I
that's
think a
fair.
I think a one is what I
That's
would consider that to be.
yeah, I think that's fair. So,
The next one is sound. I'll let you start.
sound is great. This isn't the Nolan of current day where the score and sound effects sometimes like overshadow the dialogue to a point where you can't understand people.
This is
Everything
before
is
the
clear,
blah.
crisp. Yeah, everything is clear and crisp and sounds great. The score is so good, so propelling, and it kind of gets this nice emotional core to everything and like a through line. Yeah, I would give the sound a 2 because I have no problems with it, and I think it's all great.
I agree. I give it a two.
All right.
The next one is impact, which we have said is continuity as well as the the meaningfulness of what this means to cinema. What did this
Yeah,
film do?
does it have cultural relevance?
Right.
Does it have impact? Or if it's a new movie, do we think it will? In this case, I think it's a pretty definitive two because this version of the character immediately became iconic. Between this and Casino Royale, in the next year in 2006,
I
I think that
think
kind of
just a
reshaped
quick
action films.
just a quick aside, I think this movie actually is the reason Casino Royale, because it let the creators of James or the writers of James Bond Casino Royale know that this kind of movie can succeed.
Yeah, and also this movie spawned. It made close to 500 million at the box office, and it ended up spawning two sequels that each made over $1 billion. If that's not impact, I don't know what is.
That would make a lot of sense because of the fact that, and it made so much sense when I saw this because Casino Royale was so different from the Pierce Brosnan movies, like in
Right.
a way that it was a little bit less campy, like the original Batman movies, and kind of turned its eye to a movie like this. And
Right.
as we know, of course, the original Spider-Man series kind of brought it into like a different kind of tone than other superhero movies, but this
Yeah.
movie pretty much brought in the gritty and realistic comic book movie. So,
Yes. Yeah. So
because we
yeah,
all know
two
Hulk
for impact.
2004 was not the inspiration.
What are you talking about? What, you don't like the Hulk dogs?
Ugh, oh no.
Nick Nolte grumbling about something.
I mean,
Okay, well
that's actually he wasn't playing a character. That was actually just Nick
oh yeah,
Nolte. They actually
he
just
just got drunk and just
they just
roamed
shot
quite a
him
bit.
in his apartment with his three dogs.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen that movie since I was a kid, so I don't.
Man, it did
Some people
not
have been liking it lately,
it
so
it did not age very well.
well, maybe it deserves a reevaluation because I haven't
That's
watched it for so many years.
maybe we could cover it.
Maybe yeah, maybe we cover. Maybe
Maybe next week we cover The Hulk, Ang Lee, 2004. God,
no, it's
kill
just
me.
called Hulk.
Not when
Either way, so that
not when
is
we're done with it.
was that the last category?
That was the last category. So the total that I've got is
15 out of 20.
15 out of 20.
Yep.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair.
That's
That's
I think that's
definitely
reasonable.
strong. That's a strong positive, you know.
That is definitely a strong positive because
I don't think the
if we
movie's
bring it down to
perfect.
10,
Yeah.
movie's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Not, uh, yeah, I think 15 out of 20, 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think that's about actually the lower end of what IMDb would give it. What is
Well, and
IMDb give it?
it's funny too because if we like take into where like we maybe would have like given it a point here or there, you know.
Yeah, a
I
half a
think
point. I definitely would have given it a few half a points, especially for
yeah, like I
yeah.
think that like in my mind, which I don't do ratings a lot, but back when I did, I gave this like an 8 out of 10, which to me is that's great. You know, that's a great movie. Is an
Interesting.
8
So
out of
we were pretty close.
right. So
7.5
we
out
ended
of
up
10,
kind of
8 out of
close to
10.
that just from this, which that might not happen every time we do
No,
this, but
it's not going to
shows
happen
yeah, show's rating is 7.5 out of 10 or
because
15 out of 20, however we want to do it.
we are pretty unanimous, or both of us agree with most of the things that we would consider
Yeah.
to be like easily agreeable on.
Yep.
Let's see
All right. Well,
how to end this podcast. I guess we could end it with let's pick out the next movie to watch.
okay.
Let's pick out
There's like
this will get us
400
some views.
plus.
What if we did the Chronicles of Riddick?
Oh.
That is a movie that I know that you don't want to watch, and I love watching.
Let's see. Let me see if I have access to it anyway, because I don't own it personally. Yeah, if you want to do Pitch Black instead,
Pitch Black, I like.
I have not seen Pitch Black in
You
so
have
long,
not.
and
Oh, but you have seen it.
like
That's
I
good.
have
Then.
seen it, but in a really long time. And I remember I didn't love Pitch Black. I liked Pitch Black,
Okay.
fine, but I thought it was okay.
All right, guys. We'll see you in the next episode with Pitch Black coming out sometime soon, probably. Hey guys, Mikiah and I hope y'all enjoyed the first episode of our new podcast. I'm Kyle, and together with Mikiah, we decided to work on this new project for our mutual love of movies. If you disagreed with our opinions, drop a comment. If you want to email us, link is in the description. We'll catch you next time.